Let's get started. Problem sets are now late, except for those of you for whom they're not late. Is there someone here named Jack to whom this belongs? I promise you I have not opened it or in any other way modified its contents. Okay. Many of you, I'm sure, are aware that there is a protest going on, I think either now or very shortly. I printed 125 copies of the handout, which is the usual amount. There's one left. I am going to take that as a referendum on your preferences over whether to discuss social preferences or protest them, which is something that we can cogitate on. The protest, as I interpret it, is a protest about the kind of social preferences that are reflected in things like our tax code. And I assume from your presence that you are more interested in learning about that than going out and protesting it. However, if protesters come into the lecture hall, we will welcome them, ask them their intentions, and see if we can accommodate their intentions in a way that does not disrupt our educational process too much. All right. In the meantime, social preferences. Whoops, oh, that's right. We're doing this. So we talked about sort of what the term social preferences means. It's a very general term. It simply means the ways in which other people's outcomes, what they get, and their actions, what they do, enter into individuals' utility functions and therefore affect the choices that people make. It's a little bit hard to say. I can never know quite why that happens. What's really disturbing is that ink winds up. It shows up in later slides. It'll appear suddenly out of the blue. Okay, whatever. Most economic analysis, most game theory, let's say, makes the assumption that people don't take other people's outcomes or actions into consideration at all. And many people will then throw around the term rational self-interest as if there was anything remotely rational about caring only about yourself. Right? And so the term rational self-interest, now I was using it in one way earlier in the semester, which I can try to explain if people are interested, which had nothing to do with whether or not you care about other people. It had to do with whether or not you actually make mathematical mistakes and as a result shoot yourself in the foot and leave money on the table because you didn't get the math right. But people talk about economists, people complain about economists assuming that people are self-interested. And I think that's a valid complaint, but it's also not a correct one because economists have put an enormous amount of energy into exploring people's preferences for altruism and charitable giving. People also complain that economists believe self-interest is rational, pure self-interest is rational. And that is also, I think, a reasonable thing to complain about, except that it's also not true. Economists do not claim that self-interest is rational in any way, shape, or form. Economists do, however, quite frequently make the assumption that people are simultaneously rational and self-interested. Why? As always, two main reasons. One, it makes the model simpler and is a reasonable approximation in lots of cases. Two, for some economists, it's an assumption that happens to support their political views. So that's I hope by now you're getting a sense that that's just always going to be the case. When you ask the question, why do you assume that? It's always going to be a combination of it makes the math simpler and is a reasonable approximation, and it supports my political position. Okay, obviously it's not right. We talked about this photograph of somebody selling banana bread in Hawaii on an all-volunteer basis. And where we stopped last time is with the introduction of the ultimatum game. Whoops, how do I get back to a pen? You don't want an eraser, I want a pen. Oh boy, sorry. Pen, okay. The ultimatum game it's a lot of game theory goes on in experimental labs, right, where you give people these extremely simple little tasks and you pay them $15 an hour on average. You're required to here in Cal to pay people at least an average of $15 an hour to sit and do these mindless tasks, sometimes for stakes as high as a few dollars. And this is one of them that's been run ad nauseum and thousands of times. Here's the way the ultimatum, and there are lots and lots of variations on the ultimatum game. Here's the basic framework. Okay, there's two players. They're anonymous to one another. Usually the way this is done is that they're sitting in a lab on computers. You'll have like 30 people in the room, and you're linked to some other person in the room. You don't know who it is, and they're your opponent. You're player one, they're player two, or vice versa. Okay. Player one is the proposer, and they're given in the most stripped down version of the ultimatum game. They're given a pie. Let's say $10 or 10 something. Okay, and they're asked to divide the pie. Okay. Which is to say they offer the other person a slice of the pie, which we'll call x. It's some number between 0 and 10 inclusive in my little example. Okay? So, and then the responder, who knows the size of the pie and the size of the slice, in other words, knows exactly what the distribution you're offering, you get this much, I get this much, decides whether to accept or reject the offer. If they accept the offer, the distribution is the way the proposer set it out, and if they reject, nobody gets anything. Right? So it's a take it or leave it sort of offer. And you can think of this as being somewhat comparable to I cut, you choose. Does everybody here know I cut, you choose? Right? It's how to get the slightly larger piece of apple, is you cut it very slightly biased and then make the offer. In our society, most people would choose the smaller piece. This is how you get a slightly bigger piece of pie. I cut, you choose. Except that in the ultimatum game, the person you're offering to has the option to say, we put them both into the compost. Okay? Your offer was, you went too far. Nobody gets anything. Okay. Game theory, by which I mean sort of standard game theory where the assumption of pure self-interest is made, makes a very, very clear prediction, right? If the responder cares only about their own monetary outcome, doesn't care about the outcome for the other person or the other person's actions or intentions, they should accept any positive offer whatsoever, right, down to the smallest increment possible, and they should have no reason whatsoever to reject an offer of 0, because what's the difference? 0 versus 0, boom, okay? So if you rig the game so that you can't offer 0, so that the smallest amount you can offer, say 1 penny, then game theory says the responder should never, ever, ever reject. And the equilibrium is for the proposer to offer the smallest amount possible, 0 or 1 penny or whatever the smallest amount possible is. And of course that's not what we see. Okay, what we actually see is that sort of, the median offer in these games is typically around 40 to 50% of the pie, and that kind of offer is almost always accepted, and smaller offers are accepted at lower rates, down to the point where below about 20% of the pie most offers are rejected, right? So this information here is how to win at I cut, you choose. Okay, don't go too far past 40%. Okay. What's interesting is people have studied this in various different societies. There's a paper on, actually it's not on the website yet, it will be next time. This was done in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Ljubljana, which is in what used to be Yugoslavia. I don't know what part of Yugoslavia it wound up in. Yogyakarta, which is in Indonesia, and Tokyo. And they got basically the same results. And then if you increase the stakes to several months' pay by running the experiment in poorer countries, it has little effect. Now, what I put here is that play is basically the same among industrial or industrializing societies. Okay. So if you go to Indonesia, for example, you have a situation where society is fairly well down the road of what we might loosely call westernization, although I don't think that's really the right term, but sort of moving towards industrial culture and market economies. But people with American research budgets can afford to put stakes on the table in a place like Indonesia that represent much, usually here with college students, it's like, not even an hour's wage that's at stake. And so you can go to some of these industrializing countries and you can put much larger stakes on the table with the same research budget and you get about the same results, okay? Which might seem surprising because you might think, well, if the stakes were really high, people would start acting like the model predicts, they should be more self-interested. But part of what's going on is that we think that there's a countervailing force, which is that when the stakes are higher, the psychological forces are also stronger. So it's like, really? You hosed me when you could have given me a big chunk of money? I would have let you slide if you hosed me on a couple of bucks. But you just hosed me on a week's wages? Now I really want to throw both pieces of the apple into the compost. Then there's a paper that is on the website. Some folks really took this to the nth degree. And when I say folks, I should emphasize this is a group of co-authors that consists of 11 anthropologists and 1 economist. So you can imagine that they did something a little bit different than what a team of pure economists would have done. I'm just going to focus on, they went to all these different places. These are all, I think they're all hunter-gatherer societies, although some of them I'm not sure some of them may be pastoral societies, right, sheep herders. But they're all not functioning in market economies. And they had to sort of redesign the game because people didn't understand money, and a lot of these people couldn't read or didn't have a written language. So they had to sort of redesign the game a little bit, but they did basically the same thing, the ultimatum game. And here's some results. Okay, so the Machiquenga, I'm probably pronouncing all these things wrong. Machiquenga are down here in the Peruvian rainforest. And what they did was, so what we have here is the mean and mode offer, right, as a proportion of the whole pie, and then the rejection rate and the rejection for amounts below 20%. So the Machiquenga, actually, their mean and modal offers are much smaller, right? And so the mode, sorry, there are 2 modes here, 0.15 and 0.25, and really a big chunk of the population went for quite small offers, and the rejection rate's very low, even for very small offers. Okay? And so what do we find, right, these anthropologists explain to us, this is the slash and burn, these are slash and burn horticulturalists who show a little concern for others outside their family or for social status, right? So basically these are people whose whole culture is about small family units in which really what matters is get what you need to survive for you and your family and move on. Okay? So I'm not going to give you very much, and if I give you anything at all, you're not going to reject it because we're not selfish per se, it's just our culture is driven by a different set of norms. Lamalera, where were they? They are here in Indonesia, in that little archipelago that includes Bali, I believe. Okay, so here's their mean and mode rate of offer, right? It's really high. The mean is above half, okay? And then the rejection rate is relatively low, and for small offers, quite low. So this is a whale hunting culture that is based on strong, meticulous, detailed cooperation. So they have incredibly complex rules about exactly how, within your clan system and your tribal system, you're supposed to cooperate with different people. And this idea of, you're part of the team, that's the way this works, period, end of sentence, is deeply built into their culture. It's built into their economy, right? In both of these cases, it's not just, we're nice people. We live in a bloodthirsty capitalist system, but we have to be nice people, right? Which would be the Berkeley way of thinking of itself. These are people whose economy is rigged differently, yeah? So their culture and the way that their economy is built into their culture is different. Then we have the Ao Now, who are, where are they? They're over here. I think this is Papua New Guinea. And what do? They give not so much. Okay? But they reject at very high rates, right? And you might think, well, yeah, they're rejecting because the offers are low, but the offers aren't that low. You don't see that high of a rejection rate for those kinds of offers in most industrialized societies. What's going on with these folks? This is a gift-giving-based culture, kind of like the potlatch Indians of the old Pacific Northwest, where you gain social status by giving gifts to people, but then once you've given a gift, people are on the hook to you, right? Now you've got to give back to me. And so it's this whole thing about social status, right? And who's ahead and who's behind. So they want to give this to a considerable extent, right? Because that gives them status. But then, boy, the rejection rate is really high. It's like, no, I'll reject any offer. I don't want to be on the hook to you. So again, you wouldn't get that in an industrialized society. That's just not the way that the economic structure is built into the culture of most industrialized market economies. That's all. This paper is on the website. This is all sort of just for your curiosity in some sense, but also to sort of show you that, social preferences really straddle the boundary. We call this psychology and economics, and we think that there's a psychological dimension to how people feel about other people's outcomes, but it's really starting to get also into the intersection between economics and sociology and anthropology. And for that reason, it becomes really quite difficult for economists to study this using the tools that we're familiar with, right? We're familiar with going into a lab and quote-unquote controlling everything. Well, you can't control what culture people are from. And furthermore, it's very, very difficult to control the cultural cues that people pick up from your experiment. I can say, here, choose between these 2 divisions of a pie. One of them looks selfish to me, one of them looks, altruistic, generous to me. But you might say, no, I read totally different cultural cues into those 2 options. I see that as, put yourself on the hook to somebody else, or rather, I'm sorry, I see being generous as put somebody else on the hook to me, and then not giving to them is let them off. Don't put them on the hook by being generous and making them feel like they've got to be generous back. And you don't know which of these things your game in the lab is triggering, right? So it becomes much more problematic, in my view, to study this stuff the way that economists like to study things. That said, we're now going to see what economists have done. So we're thinking about the ultimatum game as, so we have the proposer and the responder presumably being driven by somewhat different kinds of motivations, even within the same culture, even if they were the same person, different treatments. And so we're going to be able to look at responders' choices and proposers' choices to sort of pick apart what different kinds of motivations we think are going on in this very basic game. So thinking about the responder first, why do responders reject low offers? Right? One possibility is that responders dislike coming out behind the proposer, and therefore they reject low offers. Right? If this had come, if the computer had randomly assigned you to get more and me to get less, right, so that you didn't have any role in this at all, I might just simply say, I don't want to be behind. I don't want to be the little guy. I don't want to feel that way. Okay, so I'm going to reject that, even though it kind of screws you over. The other possibility is that people see the low offers as simply being unfair, unjust. You're a jerk, and I want to punish you. I want to teach you a lesson. Okay? And we can't distinguish these hypotheses using the ultimatum game. We have to do something different. Meanwhile, the proposer's motives are even harder to gauge, right? So one reason that the proposer offers non-trivial amounts might be because they're actually altruistic and they care and they want people to get a slice of the pie, right? But it could also be that they're in fact completely selfish and they just don't want to get rejected. Okay? If I know that the norm is for you to punish me if I do something that makes me look like a jerk, then I'm not going to take that risk, not because I give, not because I care about you, but because I don't want to lose out. Yeah. You got a hand up? In the green shirt? No, behind you. No, you didn't. All right. Okay, so let's start with a simple model, a very, very simple model that just is going to give us some parameters to play around with, and then let's see what tools we could use to try to distinguish different stories about social preferences in terms of these parameters. Okay, so we can organize models of social preferences into three basic categories. The first is distributional preferences, where what we care about is just the pure distribution of outcomes. You get this much, I get that much, without thinking about what you think of me or whether I'm being nice or mean to you or anything like that. Just purely outcomes based. Okay. And then we're going to talk about models of face-saving concerns, or at least some evidence about face-saving concerns, where what we care about is not just outcomes, but what you or other people think of me. Okay? Maybe because if you don't think I'm a nice guy, you'll punish me. Maybe just because I genuinely have a preference for believing that other people think nice thoughts about me. Right? Which gets complicated. One of the things that I've noticed in myself, I used to go around thinking, boy, I really care about what other people think of me. I'm really concerned about other people's opinions. What I eventually realized was I'm oblivious to what people actually think of me. I'm obsessed with what I think other people think of me. Right? I'm often completely wrong about what other people's beliefs about me are, but I'm really obsessed with my beliefs about what other people's beliefs about me are. So economists have picked into that distinction quite a lot as well. And then the third category of models or theories, we'll talk about our intentions-based models or intentions-based theories, where what I care about isn't so much what you think of me or what I think of you or what you might think I think of you, but simply how I feel about your intentions. You're a nice person, you're a nasty person, I have preferences. I don't like being around mean people. I don't like being around selfish people. I especially don't like it if they behave selfishly towards others, and I super especially don't like it if they behave selfishly towards me. And then I read intentions into everything. I used to have a really hard time driving on the freeway. In Berkeley, this didn't come up, but every time I got on the freeway or drove outside of Berkeley, I started seeing people driving around in their Hummers, right, or their Escalades, and I would automatically impute selfishness. You're burning up gas. You're taking up the road. You're driving. And it was like, and I find myself like, you don't know anything about this person. Might very well be the executive director of Doctors Without Borders. You don't know. Anyway, so let's start by talking about distributional preferences. Right. So we're going to do the dumb thing that economists always do. We're going to start by stripping out all the stuff we know really matters. Right. We're going to try to look at a set of situations in which we think that people's preferences over intentions and beliefs and self-image and things like that aren't at play. And we're going to look at just the dumb setup where all we care about is distributions of outcomes, right? Amount of money or material resources that different people get. And we're going to talk about one could think of two different kinds of distributional preferences: disinterested and interested. So disinterested would be, and you can think about how this plays into the Occupy Wall Street movement, right? How do you feel about distributions between people who aren't you and aren't close to you and aren't interacting with you and who have absolutely no impact on your life? It just, for me personally, I'll just tell you, because I don't know where I am. Definitely not in the 1%, but I don't know where I am. But I'm in a position of material wealth where I'm not upset about how much I got relative to other people. I'm enough in the middle where I'm relatively ambivalent to income disparities as they affect me, but it bugs the heck out of me that there are people so rich and so poor who aren't me and have nothing to do with me. I just don't like it at all. I like nothing about it. So that would be disinterested distributional preferences. I also happen to think it's bad for society. Then there's interested distributional preferences, which is how do I feel about splits, right? This is the, mom and daddy love my sister more than me, which is a nightmare that I think 100% of children experience, which means that it can't be true. And that's what we're going to look at first. Okay, so just to pick apart what's going on in the ultimatum game, where people are actually interacting on the basis of their social preferences, we're first going to start by chopping it in half and looking at only the part that doesn't involve a strategic interaction, or we're going to modify it so that it doesn't involve a strategic interaction, and thereby strip out all of this stuff in the box, okay? So in the dictator game, we get rid of all of that by doing this. There's two players, and the first one is a dictator, who in the ultimatum game was the proposer, and the deal is now is that it's not a taker, it's not an all or nothing offer, it's just a take it or leave it, you don't get to choose. It's I pick, you get. Okay, or sorry, I slice, you get, not I slice, you choose. Okay, so the dictator makes a distributional decision, and then that's the end of the game. Right? So in some sense, you're like, well, that doesn't seem like a game per se, but it's a little bit more like shooting buffalo out of a helicopter. But most people consider that not real sport. And usually, the dictator knows nothing about the recipients. The recipients aren't, the recipients may have feelings about the distribution that the dictator makes, but they don't get to do anything about it. Okay, and because they don't get to do anything about it, we think that concerns about reciprocity, about being punished, shouldn't be involved in this at all, right? Okay. And then, again, sort of the simplest case is where the dictator just simply splits a pie. If you have $10, you decide how much of it the other person gets. But we'll also call things dictator games where the rate at which you get more when I get less is different than 1 to 1. Okay. In a standard dictator game, in order to give you $1, I got to accept less than $1. But we can look at variants where the sort of price of altruism is above or below $1 or dollar for dollar, right? So that I can give you $2 but only give up 1. So that's a sort of way of saying that the more I give to you, the bigger the pie gets, or where the more I give to you, the smaller the pie gets, right? Where the price of altruism is greater than 1. Okay. And to organize to organize a bunch of evidence, right? So you can sort of see how this dictator game would allow us to look purely at just distributional preferences, because there's no scope for intentions-based preferences, because you can't punish me. And there might or might not be scope for face-saving concerns, as we'll see, but we're going to think at first that what we're capturing in the dictator game is just purely how do you feel about distributions between two different people. And then there are versions of it where the dictator makes a distribution between two anonymous people who aren't them, right? So then that would be a way to study disinterested distributional preferences. So here's a model that we can use to sort of organize a bunch of data on this kind of game. And what I've got here is actually a somewhat simplified version of the model in the assigned reading by Gary Charnas and Matt Rabin. In that model, they build in also an element that's about intentions-based preferences, how you feel about people being mean or not mean. And you can just go in there and rip out their intentions-based parameter, and you'll get exactly this model. Okay? So what's going on? We have, so player 2 is going to be the dictator and player 1 is the recipient. That's awkward. I need to change that, because I've been saying player 1 is the dictator and player 2 is the recipient. But in this model, because I wanted it to look like what they actually have in the paper, player 2 is the dictator and player 1 is the recipient. And then we have these two parameters, row, that p-looking thing is a row, and